Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Sanctuary. Pull your deck chair up, have a rest. We have got an incredible guest for you today. I'm joined by Evan Brown. You may know him as the host of Dynasty Debates. You may know him as a writer and ranker over at Dynasty Nerds. Evan, how you doing?
I'm dying a slow death here. I was just talking to you before the show. I've been basically sick since Christmas, but I am excited to be here and I am excited about your new project. So congratulations on the new project. Super thankful and excited to be asked to come on. Always love your work. Really enjoy all the content that you put out there. So excited to see where the Fantasy Sanctuary goes and where it takes us. So excited I can one day say I was on the show and it only just begun when you're like the next JJ Zacharyson or something.
Well, maybe not that quite yet, but yeah, no, thank you ever so much for coming on. I appreciate you putting up your MJ flu game and fighting through it for us. So yeah,
that is exactly it. That is exactly what's happening. I want that. That is MJ and the finals and me coming on to those are pretty much the same thing. Pretty much the same thing.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same. As you may see on screen, NFL storylines you can't ignore. That's the topic we're going to talk to you today. This is basically an off-season look ahead. What are we going to be talking about? What are we going to be looking about over the coming months? The biggest thing, the thing that, we're not going to talk rookies quite yet. That's down the road. But we're going to talk about vets. We're going to look at free agents. Let's start with the glam position, Evan. Free agent quarterbacks. Okay. I've spent the last 25 years being hurt, being disappointed by Tom Brady. I spent a lot of time prepping for this show. I put Tom Brady on my free agent quarterbacks list. He announced his retirement about an hour ago. What can I do? Okay.
One last turn of the knife.
Yeah, just, as a Jets fan, he didn't get enough of torturing me week in, week out, twice a year. He now has to do it again. But is there any free agent quarterbacks? We've got a few on the screen there. Anybody that you particularly interested in, you think could potentially see a change in landing spot in where they're playing the football next year?
I mean, honestly, I know we had a laugh about it and a joke there, but if you're playing Dynasty, I wouldn't drop Tom Brady. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't drop him because we saw this last year. I actually think I remember I'm in quite a few leagues and you're in way more leagues than me, but I'm pretty sure I remember a league where somebody did drop Tom Brady when he came out with the big announcement video and then somebody else picks him up on the waiver wire, like a week later when he's announced that he's coming back again. And that just is a real kick, when something like that happens. So I would just hold on to him if you can afford to, especially if you're in any sort of super flex league. But yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I had one league where somebody dropped Tom Brady. Somebody picked them up for $1 fab the next day. Obviously, I can't remember what it was. A month later, he announced he was coming back, and the team that picked him up sold him back to the original team for 2 second-round picks.
Oh my gosh,
that is brutal. So yeah.
That is league breaking stuff, man. Like, I just don't know how you can come back from that.
I couldn't believe it, except I'm too stubborn. There's no way that I'd be giving up capital for a guy that I dropped, even if I was desperately in need. I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
No. Like, I could see myself like offering some fab or something. You know what I mean? Like, look, I was an idiot. I'll give you like $50 fab or something for him. But like, yeah, I wouldn't be giving like 2 seconds. Yeah, exactly. No, that is painful, man. Honestly, guy that I'm really interested in is actually Daniel Jones. And that sounds weird saying that, right? Because he's had such a weird start to his career. But do you know what really made me think about this is the saga of Jared Goff. Join me as we discuss the saga of Jared Goff. Jared Goff, I thought there was a couple of players this year, Jared Goff being the most prominent one, that I thought, man, we really missed as a community. We really missed on a couple of these players that if you had paid attention, if you had dug in and done your homework and had a more confident take on some of these players, you could have made such a massive ROI, right? And in Dynasty, that's such a huge part of the game is being able to buy low and then sell high. Jared Goff's one of those guys that last year, I remember in the offseason, you couldn't pay people to take him off your roster. Like, nobody wanted Jared Goff. He was absolutely just bottom of the barrel. I only had him in one team, and I remember it was about it was a super flex league, 5 or 6 weeks into the season. I finally was able to trade him away, and I traded him for, honestly, like 2 second-round picks. It was like a 23-second and a 24-second, and that, you should have seen the group chat. Like, you would have thought that I just got like 6 first-round picks for Jared Goff. The amount of abuse that they were giving the guy that bought him from me or traded for him, like, you literally would have thought it was like the fleece of the century. And I'm like, it's not for a starting quarterback. I mean, that's 2 second-round picks, and spread over 2 years even. Like, that's not, But anyways, my point is, he just was like, nobody wanted him, nobody was interested in him, and yet he was what, the QB 10 on the year. Do you know what I mean? So if you were able to pick him up for like a 3rd round pick in a super flex league or something like that, and then you have basically what turned out to be a reliable QB2 all year, that just gives you so much maneuverability. So I was sort of thinking about this, and what I find really interesting is that Daniel Jones had his by far best, year of his young career, and I feel like still nobody really believes in him, and nobody really is interested in him for fantasy. Like, I feel like still everyone is basically like out on him. So to me, I'm really interested in Daniel Jones, and I honestly think, so listen to this. This is fascinating to me as I thought about this. We're going to play a little game called Jared Goff or Daniel Jones. Are you ready for this, Rich?
Let's go.
So we're going to talk. The reason this made me think of this is because of the kind of, nobody wants them. Everybody's made up their mind that they're not that interesting. You get the odd truther, but in general, nobody really wants them. And I think they're in fairly similar situations. So I think, Daniel Jones going into the 2023 season is going to be in a pretty similar situation to what Jared Goff was in going into the 2022 season. An interesting offense, a head coach that's making some moves, making some changes, an offense that's on its way up. People haven't really caught up with that yet. And I'm all about, like, I want to get on the front foot of these trends. I want to make some really nice moves in the offseason if possible. So looking back at Jared Goff's 2021, and then comparing it to Daniel Jones 2022, so like first year in a new scheme with a new head coach, things like that. Now, who do you think had a better completion percentage, Jared Goff in 2021 or Daniel Jones in 2022?
So my immediate instinct is Jared Goff in 2021. So I'm going to go with Daniel Jones in 2022 because I feel like that's the reason you've asked the question.
Well, funny enough, you should say that. But they were the exact same. So they were both 67.2%.
That's a trick question.
It is. It is. And you nailed it because you said you felt one way, you're going to go the other. So you were obviously torn, and that's why. Who do you think had more passing yards, Jared Goff in 2021 or Daniel Jones in 2022?
I presume Jared Goff in 2021.
So Jared Goff had 45 more yards passing. So Daniel Jones threw for 3,205 yards this year. Jared Goff threw for 3,245 yards this year. Who do you think had maybe, shall we say, more touchdowns? Who had more touchdowns, Jared Goff in 2021 or Daniel Jones in 2022?
Is that total touchdowns or just passing touchdowns?
Just passing touchdowns, yeah.
I'm going to go Jared Goff.
Jared Goff had 19. Daniel Jones had 15. So very close, but yes, slight edge to Jared Goff. And then just literally fascinating. We could go on this all day, but who do you think had the better QB rating, like the actual passer rating?
I presume Jared Goff.
Literally Daniel Jones. So Jared Goff had a 91.5 passer rating. Daniel Jones had a 92.5. So it was only 1 point. So this is what I find fascinating is, like, you look at their stats, right? So they had the exact same completion percentage, almost identical yards, a couple more touchdowns for Jared Goff, and even like their average passing distance, Jared Goff was 6.6 and Daniel Jones was 6.8. Like, very, very identical. Now, where it gets really interesting is in 2021, Jared Goff was only like QB 18 or 20, right? With those exact same stats because of the rushing floor, which is so important. Daniel Jones was like QB 7 last year, right? But you wouldn't think that the way people talk about him, the way people think about him. Chances are he does go back to the Giants. I think that's best for both parties probably at this stage. But again, I just think that's really, really fascinating. And to me, I feel like there's a real opportunity there of, I was looking at, for example, looking again, comparing and contrasting average depth of target. Last year, Jared Goff was pretty much next to the bottom. Daniel Jones was tied for worst average depth of target among all quarterbacks with 150 dropbacks. There's just so many similarities. And the reason I bring that up is because, like I said, if we'd have been wise and been on the front foot and invested in Jared Goff, we would have had a huge return on investment. You don't need to hold on to him for the next 5 years. You could have just sold high on him this year or something like that. Daniel Jones, he had about 700 rushing yards, I believe, this year. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's off the top of my head. But again, that was the difference. If you took away most of his rushing yards, which Jared Goff doesn't really offer you anything on the ground, if you took away those rushing yards, they had very similar fantasy points per game and things like that. So, but he does offer you that. What was the nickname this year? It was Vanilla Vic, was it? I mean, Daniel Jones is like a poor man's Justin Fields, a poor man's Lamar Jackson. You know what I mean? The guy that nobody's excited about, nobody's really pumped about, unless you're a Giants fan, maybe. Even then, I think they're kind of out on him, but I really think he's a sound investment because at this moment in time, I was looking at a dynasty trade calculator, which there's a lot of tools out there. You can use DLF. People talk about KTC. I don't like KTC, but right now, dynasty trade calculator literally has Jared Goff worth slightly more than Daniel Jones, like slightly more, but still. That's a little bit more, and I would rather have Daniel Jones. Give me the rushing upside. Give me the guy who finished as a top 10, top 8 QB this year, who potentially will have better weapons, more comfort in the system. I mean, he looked so much better this year than he has the last couple of years, and that's just because he has a good head coach, a stable system. I apologize for going 10 minutes about Daniel Jones. I promise I'm not a New York Giants fan, but that's my answer. Daniel Jones, final answer.
Never apologize. And I think I agree with a lot of what you said. We talk about rushing production and people forget about Dan Jones. So as you said, 708 yards, pretty much nailed on. He also had 7 touchdowns. Like that's an obscene. That's 100. I'm just off the top of my head, 112 fantasy points just there in rushing production. That's like 5 points a game. That's the difference between being an average QB and QB7. I think I said this on when we were doing our team previews. If Daniel Jones was under contract for the next 4 years and I knew that the Giants were buying into him, he'd be my dynasty QB 12 right now. I'd have him in a tier with Tua and that would be it. Because I think when he's on the field, he's going to be great. My issue is that I don't know if the Giants are going to commit to him. And look, there's been all sorts of talk about the Giants might franchise him and stuff like that. I'm sorry. The running back franchise tag is 10 million. We're going to come on to this in a bit. I can't see how they can't franchise tag Saquon Barkley. That means that they've got kind of 3 options with Daniel Jones. They either need to pay him long term, they pay him on like a 2-year prove it deal, or they let him walk. To me, I think it's that middle option. And I just don't believe, I say this quite a lot. I believe that every GM and every head coach basically gets one go at committing to a franchise quarterback. And I just don't know, as good as he was this last year, as good as the Giants were and overproduced on expectations, when it got to the playoffs, we saw there wasn't really enough juice to get him there. And I just don't know if Brian Daboll is going to say, I'm putting all my eggs in the Daniel Jones basket. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see a 3-year contract where he's getting paid 25, 30 million, of which 40, 50 million is guaranteed. So it's kind of a 1.5 years, 2 years that they commit to him. So it's like, yeah, we're going to give you some money. You've done well, but we've got a very soon out if we can find an alternative, if we can get, a draft pick or trade up in the draft and go and get the long-term answer, because I just don't believe that they think Daniel Jones is the long-term answer.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I agreed to them. For the most part, I agree with what you're saying because I'm not suggesting. And I guess what the nice part is, the reason I'm excited about Daniel Jones and I'm highlighting him is because I don't think you need to break the bank. That's the point. Is that especially, and again, this is a super flex conversation. I'm just gonna be clarifying that in case I didn't say that already. Like, this is a super flex conversation. Most of my leagues these days are super flex, and honestly, the QB landscape is kind of gross. It's sort of becoming what the tight end landscape was for years. Where there's like a couple of really great options, then there's a bunch of like, if you squint hard enough, you can make it look okay, and that's why, to me, somebody like Daniel Jones, like, I think that we, 5 years ago, we liked to talk about, let's, you lock up this QB because that's going to be your QB for 10 years. And it's like, dude, there's not a lot of QBs that I feel confident saying for the next 10 years is going to be my QB on my dynasty roster. You know what I mean? Like, there's probably 4 or 5 of them, and that's about it. And so I think that we need to start we have to look at these like 2 to 3 year windows really. And, you know, if you're sitting there and you're a contender-ish, you've got a late first round pick, if you've still held on to your first round pick, you're probably not getting a solid QB in this draft at, you know, 110, 111, 112. You know, but if you can go and turn that 111, 112 into Daniel Jones and have yourself another QB, maybe your third QB or fourth QB on your team, really give yourself some depth and be ready for a push next year. I mean, most money leagues, you win once and that pays your next 4 or 5 years of league fees and things like that. So I think for me, that's kind of some of the reasons it's risk reward. There's a bunch of rubbish QB play at the minute. Like there's honestly like half the league would love an upgrade at QB.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even if he doesn't cut it in the Giants, you know, he may cut it somewhere else. You know what I mean? If he continues to improve.
100%. I think that's, I've literally sitting here listening to you. I've had like an epiphany because I've preached for the last 3 years that QB age is overvalued. And, you know, people are obsessing over going out and getting the rookie, the unproven. You know, last year, Zach Wilson was going an ADP ahead of Aaron Rodgers, which I was sitting here, okay, Aaron Rodgers didn't have a good year, but I can guarantee you'd rather have Aaron Rodgers in the Dynasty League than Zach Wilson right now. And Daniel Jones is in that exact scenario. I'm sitting here saying, oh, you know, I don't know if I can value Daniel Jones because the Giants haven't committed to him. He might lose his job in 2 years. Well, actually, he's undervalued. I only need him 2 years. You know, any of these rookies coming out might lose their job in 2 years, as Zach Wilson has just shown. So actually, you've hit the nail on the head, and you know I'm kicking myself that I've not thought of this sooner. You know, people like
well, that's what happens. You listen to me and you have epiphanies. That's what happens. No, but I agree with you. You're right and that's the point, isn't it? It's like, you know, we miss so much, especially when it comes to QB evaluation. It's a hard thing to get right. Like even the guys who get paid lots and lots of money get it wrong all the time. And honestly, like as much as we would love to see Trey Lance smash, like we don't know that's going to happen. You know, we don't know Trey Lance is going to ever really make it. We don't think that Zach Wilson is going to make it at this stage. You know, like we're looking at like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence really, you know, out of that class. And that was supposed to be a really strong class. So, I mean, this class coming up, like we're thinking what? Stroud and Young, maybe Anthony Richardson has like the legs to make something happen. Maybe Will Levis could be another Josh Allen. If you know, we can squint and try and make things happen. But I mean, the odds are you're not even going to get 4 QBs out of this next class that are going to be really solid contributors to your fantasy rosters and Superflex. So yeah, exactly. I think you've nailed it. Guys like Goff are still undervalued, but Daniel Jones, give me Daniel Jones, give me Vanilla Vic, give me somebody who can give me that rushing upside, but I'm not having to pay Lamar Jackson prices.
Exactly that. And you touched on Lamar Jackson. We'll quickly come back to these last two. Lamar Jackson, I don't know if you agree with me, Evan. I basically am not talking about him as a free agent because as far as I'm concerned, the Ravens are either signing him long-term or tagging him. There's no other scenario. Do you agree?
You would think so. You would think so, but the only thing I guess that is it just was such an unfortunate sort of way that the season played out for both parties, I think, because for him, he was sort of betting on himself and he's like, until you give me that really big number, I'm not accepting anything less. Now, Lamar sort of strikes me as the type of player that's not going to really back down on that. Do you know what I mean? So yes, they might franchise tag him, but again, it leaves you in that sort of situation where you're like, well, what do we do with this? You know, he's been beat up the last couple of years. We hope that he's back to full fitness and everything's ready to rock. But yeah, he's a really tricky one because you're sort of like, well, what's going to happen? Because from what all the signals are that the Ravens aren't willing to give him this huge, massive, guaranteed bumper contract that he wants. And so you're sort of like, well, what happens here? How does this play out? You know what I mean? I think you're right. He probably is back next year, whether it be on the franchise tag or whether they work something out, but it is a bit freaky.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that a lot has been made at the end of the season. I think that it's, you know, let's take some time. They'll sit back, they'll relax, and they'll say, actually, the best thing for us is keeping Lamar around. And I think he's going to. I think you're right. I think the best thing would be just to tie him down to a big contract because they've sort of tried to build their offense around him. They've tried to like kind of create a Lamar. So like to go out and get another quarterback, they're going to have to almost start from scratch again, you know, and build around that person's strengths maybe more. So yeah, it would make the most sense, but it's just whether or not they can do it, you know, with the cap and whether they want to do it, I suppose. Yeah, exactly that. So the final one, Jimmy G, you know, we don't have to go into any great detail. I've run through QB landscape. I think there's 8 legitimate week 1 starting spots available. That's not counting Arizona because I'm counting Kyler. I know he's probably not going to start week 1. I've got Jimmy G as my 7th best available quarterback. That's me basically saying I think Jimmy G is going to start somewhere next year. I don't know where it is. If anyone knows, probably go and put somewhere on it because you know a lot more than I do. But I think he's massively undervalued in terms of dynasty circles right now. And I think that because he doesn't have a landing spot, because we know he's probably not going to be around in San Francisco, you can probably go and sneakily grab him away whilst people are thinking, oh, he's not a starting quarterback, because in 2 months' time, I think he's going to be a starting quarterback.
Yeah, for me, he's very much just like price dependent. It's like, I think if you can get him, for a really cheap deal in a super flex league, that it's always worth it to get somebody that speculatively could be a starting quarterback. That's just a general, like last year, for example, I had a team that league that I was talking about where I traded away Goff. He was like my QB 4 or 5, because I don't always do it, but in an ideal world, I like to really have 4 or 5 quarterbacks in a super flex league. It just is a nice luxury to have. And in that league, he was QB 4 or 5, something like that. Traded him away, and then whoever had Geno Smith last year basically was just like willing to take a mid-second round pick for him. And I was like, I don't even need Geno Smith, but a starting quarterback who is like doing well and probably is going to be a starting quarterback next year for a 2nd round pick, I have to do it. You know what I mean? Like I felt like compelled to do it. So that's the way I look at it with Jimmy G, is like, like if somebody's going to take a late 2nd round pick for him, you know what I mean? Because they just don't believe in him, or they're just like, whatever, he's a bum. Then absolutely. But as far as like, I'm not giving away a first for him, or I'm not giving away like a first plus for him or anything, because I don't think there's really a ceiling there. I think for me personally, the way I interpret it, that San Francisco offense is like a dream for a quarterback. Like Brock Purdy, I do think I kind of come down right in the middle of this whole Brock Purdy argument. I don't think he was like the second coming of Tom Brady. I don't think he was like the greatest thing since sliced bread. But at the same time, I don't think he's just a bum off the street and anybody could do what he did. I think he's talented. I think he did a lot better than people expected. But I do think that San Francisco scheme, the talent that they have on offense is a dream for quarterbacks like him to work with. And so I don't know that Jimmy G would be as fantasy relevant in other schemes where maybe there's not as much, cutting edge sort of, like if he ends up, say, for example, in Houston for whatever reason, they say they go a different direction. They decide not to take a franchise quarterback because they're loading up on defense or whatever it is, because they got DeMeco Ryans, and then, he's familiar with Jimmy G and he brings Jimmy G over, that kind of thing. If that happens, I don't think he's a top 12 quarterback this year. You know what I mean? I think he's not mid to low end QB2. So it's like, well, why are you going to be throwing multiple firsts at a like mid to low end QB2? So for me, it's very much price dependent, but I do agree with you that anybody who you think can, get a deal on that you believe will be a starting quarterback next year. That's why I was in on Davis Mills last year, because he was so cheap and a part of the offseason. And I was like, okay, I think he will be the starting quarterback. And he was. And if he does take that step forward, then it's a massive all right. He didn't take the step forward, but at the same time, the investment was like a mid to late 2nd round pick a lot of the offseason. So it wasn't this big, massive investment. And when you look at the quarterback class that you had last year, you weren't any worse off taking a shot on Davis Mills than you were taking a shot on Malik Willis or whatever,
Yeah. And I think, the price at the moment, Jimmy G's QB 26 in DLF ADP, like you're not even, if he is a back end QB2, he's overproducing his current price, isn't he?
Exactly.
So we're diving over to the running back position now. Feels like this is probably the sexiest free agents pool, shall we say? Obviously headlined with Saquon Barkley, fantastic break back, if that's a real word, bounce back season. Do you think that the Giants tag him? Do you think he could potentially hit free agency?
Yeah, I mean, I think this would be my understanding. Again, this is just sort of reading between the lines and trying to listen to like, what coaches have said and things. I think in an ideal world, they would love to run it back with Danny Dimes and Saquon, see what they can do in the draft, see if they can start building something there. But I think it's just all very much going to be price dependent and things like that, because obviously Saquon struggled for a couple years with injury. He knows, he's a smart guy. He knows he has a short shelf life as a running back in the NFL, especially to be considered an elite running back. You look at guys like Dalvin Cook, Zeke, they haven't even been able to make it to the end of their big money second contracts before now they're being looked at as like, that was a mistake. That was disposable. So I think personally what makes the most sense for him is to try and get a contract. And if they don't want to give him a contract or they can't afford to give him a contract, it's not his decision whether he gets tagged or not. But I think that it seems to me like Dayball and that kind of coaching staff, they seem like good guys. Like, they seem like they're like, hey, look, we want you to do this. We want you to do that. We're willing to work with you. And if they can't come to some sort of agreement, I don't think they would stand in his way of going and looking elsewhere and trying to get something like that. But again, it just depends on how it works out. I think the smartest thing for him to do is to look around and see if he can get one of those Dalvin, Zeke, kind of contracts, maybe not quite a CMC contract, but something like that, because he's got a short shelf life, and if he did, heaven forbid, tears ACL again next year or something like that, what are the odds that he's ever going to really get a big, massive contract? So I think for him, it makes the most sense to try and make some money, but does it make the most sense for the Giants to give him like a 3 or 4 year deal?
Yeah. I think for me, Saquon's now in the point where I'm actively trying to sell Saquon. And I think that, people will go, oh, but do you not like winning? For me, anytime a running back hits this point in their career, as soon as they're hitting their second contract, I'm out. I'm looking to pivot to another running back plus picks. And, he's currently at RB4 in ADP, which, it's where I've got him ranked. But 26-year-old running back with the injury history that Saquon's had, yes, it was an incredible season, but I think that this is probably his last peak value. And I think that if I can pivot off him to, I don't know, let's say Ramondre Stevenson plus a good pick, can I get maybe J.K. Dobbins in a first or something like that? Those are the kind of moves that I'm looking to make, because I'm concerned that Saquon Barkley's dynasty value is, it might not drop in the next 6 months, it might not drop in the next year, but it is going to drop sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I think as well, you make a really good point that I personally really emphasize in the offseason. It's all about value for me. I don't care at all about roster construction in the offseason, especially this early in the offseason. Like, we've got 7-8 months before football's being played. Like, at this point, it's all just about X's and O's. It's about value. It's about like dollar signs, really, and to your point, Saquon's value at the moment has gone back up to a top 3, top 4 dynasty running back. Now, also another side note, we'll have another conversation. Maybe you'll come back on my show and we'll have a long conversation about the dynasty landscape for running backs at the minute is a mess. Like, honestly, there's about 3 running backs in the top 10 that I'm like genuinely excited to have on my team. And the rest of them, I'm like, do I really want this guy on my team? Do I really want like Joe Mixon on my team? Do I really want Dalvin Cook? Do I really want all these guys on my, Derrick Henry's? Do I want those guys on my dynasty teams? It's really genuinely a mess at the minute. And so RBs in general, I don't really like investing in, especially in the offseason. So yeah, if I can sell high on Saquon, if I can sell high on Miles Sanders, which is going to be harder to do, Tony Pollard, any of these guys, I'm happy to do so, because I think that this draft class that's coming in, I know we're not talking rookies today, I don't think that there's a whole boatload of Saquon Barkleys in this draft class, but I think there's a lot of decent to very good running backs in this draft class. And I think that this landscape in the NFL is shifting anyways, where there's very few bell cow roles anymore anyways. So you're going to just, you're really going to be stuck if you're really hanging your hat on having a Saquon Barkley or a, Derrick Henry or whatever. So I agree with you. I would certainly be looking to shop Saquon and see if I can get max value for him right now, because if something happens, like he goes somewhere where they already have a running back and they're just like, because they want to have a nice tandem, you know what I mean? Or say they keep him and then for whatever reason they sign a Leonard Fournette or something, you know what I mean? Something happens, that's going to just knock his value massively, because people are going to get worried. Or again, heaven forbid, he gets injured in the offseason or he gets injured in game 1. Then you're going to be stuck with a 26, 27-year-old running back who's on a second contract, who's deteriorating value. So yeah, absolutely. If you love your running backs, see if you can flip him for, one of those other guys plus, and then just stock up on some wide receivers and some quarterbacks.
Yeah, I completely agree. Any other free agent running backs that you're particularly intrigued, you think could be interesting this offseason?
Not really. I mean, like I said, for me, it's all about value in the offseason. And honestly, as far as running backs go, like there's very few like very few running backs I go out and pursue in the offseason. Like, I just don't like investing a lot of draft capital and stuff in running backs anyways for Dynasty, but especially not in the offseason because so much changes, you know, every year so much changes. There's always, you know, something like a Cam Akers or a J.K. Dobbins gets injured in the offseason, and that just smashes their value and it ruins your, you know, if you've gone out and traded 2 firsts for J.K. Dobbins and then you've been really crying, you know, for the last year or two. So I think for me, no, I think that, you know, it could be interesting to see what this whole injury situation does to Tony Pollard's value, because I think a lot of people are super excited about him hitting the free agency market, see what he could become. But there's not anybody really that I'm going out of my way to try and really trade for urgently, other than like Breece Hall.
Yeah, no, I love that one. I think for me, I think the Tony Pollard one is interesting just because I wonder if the injury potentially means that he could be back in Dallas on a 1-year prove-it deal. I don't know if. I hope that another team is willing to pay him a decent contract, because I want all running backs to get paid, because I feel like it's such a brutal position. But I do wonder if teams are going to say, oh, he's injured, don't know, let's not give him a long-term deal. And therefore he's back in Dallas on a 1-year, $7-8 million deal.
Yeah. And honestly,
and to
man,
me, that's the best thing for his value.
And honestly, I'm serious. Like, and I know this is not gospel. It's not a perfect thing or anything, but I was messing around just for fun the other day on the PFF, you know, mock draft simulator, and looking at like different options for Vikings or the Bears or whatever, just curious about some things. And like, you know, and again, this is not gospel. It's not exactly, but like you were getting guys like Eric Gray and Tajay Sharp and like these guys in like the 4th, 5th round, you know what I mean? Like, and that's like, those guys are pretty good running backs. You know what I mean? I don't think there's not a lot of need. I think most teams are looking around being like, man, that really sucks that they paid Zeke. Man, that really sucks that they paid Dalvin. That really sucks that they paid Mixon. Those guys are real casualties. They're really slowing them down now. Why did they get just as much production out of Ramondre Stevenson, a 4th round pick, as they got out of like, you know, Damian Harris? Why did they get just as much or better production, you know, out of whoever, you know, like Samaje Perine, as they did Joe Mixon? You know what I mean? And I think that the kind of the penny is dropping, for lack of a better term, where I don't know how many more of these really big, massive contracts they're going to keep handing out, because it doesn't seem to play out for anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like you'd be better off playing your rookie contract, franchise tag, and then you can probably let them go, which is a really grim proposition for such an exciting position, particularly for fantasy. Looking over to an unsexy position, I think, in free agency, wide receivers. We've got these 4 on the screen. There's also Juju Smith-Schuster. Is there anyone that you're particularly excited about that could hit the open market?
Not really, man. Like Jacoby Myers, I suppose, really, you know, he's probably the obvious one. And even I think that I feel like it's weird. He's a weird case study because he is a value. I get it. He is a value in startups. He is a value in redraft every year. But at the same time, there's like the hive of Jacoby Myers truthers that act like he's, you know, this incredible, just amazing value that you're just so happy you have. And like, I don't know, like he's good, but not great. I think he's he's overperformed what we all expected. What was he, an undrafted? Wasn't he undrafted? Yeah. A UDFA. So he's certainly overperformed what was expected of him. He's had a really nice career. I think he'll get a solid payday because of look how crap the agent market is. But I don't know that he's ever going to be like I don't think he's ever going to be your wide receiver 1. You know, I don't even think he's necessarily going to be your wide receiver 2, like that you're going to feel comfortable and confident rolling out as your wide receiver 2. I think if you have him as like a nice flex play, that's a nice, you know, that's a nice thing. And I am interested. I will say, you know, I know it's been made fun of and everyone's kind of having a laugh about the Bill O'Brien signing in New England. I actually think that's a really good thing for New England. I mean, I think it's a real bump up because their offense was awful this year, like truly terrible. And I think they just set them up to fail because they didn't even have an offensive coordinator. They didn't have anybody who was even an offensive mind. And for all of his like faults and foibles, like Bill O'Brien has shown that he is a good offensive coordinator. He is a good guy to get offenses rolling in the right direction. I mean, the Texans really, I would say almost overachieved every year when he was their head coach. So with him coming into town, if they re-sign Jacoby Myers, I do think that's actually a really good thing for his value for him and Mac Jones. But yeah, I think just price dependent. He's not somebody that I'm like, you must get Jacoby Myers at all costs, but he is somebody that like, if you're in a league where maybe they're not the most savvy and they're not really paying attention to things like that, maybe they're just thinking about rookies, and you can get Jakobi Meyers for like a second or something like that, you know, a mid to late second, I would, yeah, that'd be sweet. Like, that'd be nice. That'd be a nice little addition, you know, to your team, but I'm not going to like pay a first for him.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think before the Mac Jones injury, Jakobi Meyers was top 12 in yards per route run. He was top 12 in targets per route run. He was top 12 in points per game. Like, before the Mac Jones injury, he was producing, and it kind of went under the radar. He had a bit of a, you know, should we say a drifting finish to the season where he didn't kind of kick on. But as you said, this offense should take a kick forward. I think there's going to be some investment in terms of the skill position players. I think that Mac Jones has done enough to solidify himself as the starting quarterback for next year. And hopefully, as you said, Bill O'Brien coming in, this offense could take a step forward. I fully expect Jakobi Meyers to be around. I think they're going to sign him. I was reading today, the franchise tag is like $18.5 million for Jakobi Meyers. I think there's no world in which they're franchise tagging him. I do expect them to sign, you know, a 2-3 year contract, and hopefully he can get locked up for the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's definitely the one to go after there. I mean, to your point, I think even with the rough season that he had, if you look at all wide receivers last year with a minimum 50 targets, I'm pretty sure he was top 24 for PFF grade, you know, for offense and for route running and things like that. So he is a solid wide receiver. And I do think, you know, I personally think that Mac Jones goes into that like Jared Goff category that we were talking about, where he's a buy because he's so, everyone's like, yuck, Patriots offense, yuck. But honestly, Mac Jones was a top 12 PFF quarterback his rookie year. Like he had a really solid rookie year when they had a decent offensive coordinator. And now that they've got a better offensive coordinator in, depending on how their offseason goes, I think he could be a sneaky buy low.
Yeah, no, I like that. Before we dive across to the final position of free agencies, if you aren't, make sure you're liking, subscribing, hit that big thumbs up button for us. It really helps out. The final position, Evan, an interesting class. We've got the free agent tight ends. We can see there Evan Ingram, Dalton Schultz, Robert Tonyan, Mike Gesicki.
Dog. Is
there anyone that you think could be a value? Anyone you think that perhaps is overvalued at the moment?
I think Evan Ingram is probably, you know, a value still. He was an amazing value last offseason. Everyone was just done with Evan Ingram, sick, sore, and tired of him. Big disappointment in New York and stuff. And so if you were able to get him for like a third, which was definitely possible last offseason, then you certainly reap the rewards of it. So it depends. I mean, he had a really nice year, but I think sometimes in Dynasty, once we make up our minds about somebody, it's like really hard to convince us that we're wrong. So I think there's probably people that still have some take lock. You might still be able to get a deal on Evan Ingram. For me personally, I'm no interest whatsoever in Robert Tonyan. I mean, and even Mike Gesicki, like, I think he would need to go to the right landing. I think if he went to the right offense, the right, you know, situation, I think he could be good, you know, certainly good for fantasy. I think I certainly not somebody, again, we're not talking about it. I'm not going to get into it, but it's a really strong tight end class that's coming in this year in 2023. And so there's definitely a lot of other dudes that I'm more interested. I think of all those guys you've got on the screen there, Evan Ingram's probably the one that I'd be the most interested in, you know, based on how good of a year he had there. I'd be interested to see what Jacksonville does, you know, as far as like how, if they try and tie him down long term. He seems to have had a pretty good rapport there, and they're certainly on the up. Dalton Schultz, in my opinion, is just a guy. I'm quite happy trading out on Dalton Schultz. If there are believers in your league, if somebody's excited about Dalton Schultz, you know, now that they've gotten rid of Kellen Moore and the Cowboys offense just feels like it's really stagnated. It's really hit its plateau. And I don't believe in McCarthy personally as a head coach. You know, I just think Dalton Schultz is just a guy. I don't think that he's this like dominant tight end. He's, you know, tight end landscape is gross in general. So if you can trade away, you know, Dalton Schultz, I'd be happy to do so if you can get a nice, you know, nice return on him.
Yeah. So for me, Robert Tonyan, no value. Don't want anything to do with him. I think Rodgers is going to be gone. I don't know where he's going to end up. I'm fine with that. Mike Gesicki, I think basically if he gets treated as a wide receiver in free agency and a team goes and says, we're going to line him up in the slot, we're going to treat him as a pure wide receiver, I'm probably really interested. I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm probably out. Evan Ingram, I think I agree with you. I think he's probably going to be back in Jacksonville. If he is, I'm quite interested in him and think it's a value. If he hits the the open market and he ends up going elsewhere, I'm probably less interested, just because I don't like tight ends traditionally moving team, because I think it's such a team specific position in terms of how they're used that I don't think that you look at the history, there's not many that move teams and succeed. To that point, I think Dalton Schultz is maybe the most kind of Rorschach tests type player in Dynasty at the moment. I think that if you look at him, if he's back in Dallas, if he can be the number 2 target, I think he is a screaming value at his current price. If he moves in free agency, if Dallas goes out and spends high draft capital, free agent money to go and bring in a competent second receiver, Michael Gallup's another year back from the injury, and Dalton Schultz is either back in Dallas as like the 4th option or on another team, then yeah, I probably don't want any part of him. So I think he could be equally overpriced and undervalued in equal measure, depending on what happens over the next couple of months.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it just, again, like you say, it's literally league to league. It's not, he's the guys like Kelsey or even Andrews, like you're like, okay, wherever he is, whatever league you're in, they're going to be valued and they're going to be like, they're going to cost you a premium. But I think there's probably leagues, like you said, to your point, where Dalton Schultz is treated as like his top 3 tight end or something, whereas I'm not interested in that price. If somebody's just like, oh, whatever, the Cowboys suck and Dalton Schultz is a bum and they're treating him as like, tight end 16 or something, then yeah, absolutely. Like if you've punted tight end and you have no really strong options, then yeah, certainly go after him. But for me, yeah, it's just like, I don't see him as like this generational talent who like, oh my goodness, you need him on your team, that's going to push you over the top and make you a contender. Like, Jake Ferguson, he looked all right at times. He's got some potential going into like year 2. We know the tight end is a slow burner, takes some time. I just think that CeeDee Lamb's looked great this year. I think Gallup looked pretty terrible this year. Yes, he'll be another year further removed from the injury, but it'll be interesting to see how they attack it. If they do actually go after another decent wide receiver, that could just cut down on Dalton Schultz's opportunities. So yeah, very much I agree with you. Price dependent. If it is a low price, then yeah, go for it.
So we're going to fire through. This is going to be relatively quick fire now, Evan. We're going to look at some players that are potentially in limbo, that might get traded, that might get cut. There's some interesting kind of scenarios ahead looking at the offseason. I want to hear your thoughts on where you think they end up, whether they stay where they are, and potentially what you think that could do to their dynasty value. So let's start with the QBs. The first one, the big name, it feels like everyone's talking about him. I'm convinced he's getting traded in the next 2 weeks. I'm convinced that my Jets are going to massively overpay. He's going to be horrific on the Jets, and it's going to continue the sadness that I've experienced over the last 25 years. Aaron Rodgers, do you think he gets traded? Do you think he's back with the Packers? What do you think that does to his dynasty value?
I mean, yeah, I definitely, I will just go on record as saying like there was somebody, I think at this time of year, everybody has a rumor about everyone going everywhere just because they need clicks. But somebody mentioned that Aaron Rodgers would be that the Vikings were interested in. And I just want to put it out there that if we trade for Aaron Rodgers, I am no longer a Vikings fan. I will renounce my schooldom and I will be like, I don't even know, a Bills fan or a Chargers fan or something, because I'm not going down that road. But Aaron Rodgers, man, that is a tough one. I honestly, genuinely not even going to hazard a guess. I feel like we've done this for like 3 or 4 years now, where it's like every year we're like, oh, what's he going to do? Is he going to retire? Is he going to come back? Is he going to go somewhere else? You know what I think would be hilarious is if Tampa Bay traded for him. I think it would be so funny. Like Tom Brady just retires and they're like, well, we need another number 12 and like go out and trade for Aaron Rodgers and just try and run it back with the team that they already had. But I honestly have no idea. I could definitely see him ending up in New York with your Jets, which would be sad for me because they have such an exciting young team. I don't feel like Aaron Rodgers is the long-term answer. But man, it's tough to say, dude. Like it wouldn't surprise me if he just comes back to Green Bay again next year. He just throws a bunch of drama, gets himself talked about all off season, and then comes back again.
Yeah, I think he's going to get traded. I'd be gobsmacked if he went to the Bucks, just because I think the Bucks are 35 million over the cap as it is. I'm not quite sure how they'd manage to fit that under the cap numbers. I think that the Jets is a realistic scenario. I think basically wherever he goes, he's going to have a say. And I honestly think it's going to be a boost for his dynasty value because, yes, we can talk up Christian Watson and we can talk up Romeo Dubs and things like that. It was a below average, if not one of the worst receiving rooms in the league last year. And I think wherever he goes, it's going to be an improvement. Let's not also forget that he played most of the year with a broken thumb. I think that he is a
find someone to love you the way that Rich loves Aaron Rodgers. I gotta admit,
I'm diving back in.
Your bromance for Aaron Rodgers knows no bounds.
I think Aaron Rodgers is a value in Dynasty at the moment. It's what are we talking in terms of current ADP? He is QB 20. He's going below Jared Goff. Like, come on, what are we doing here? The next guy. We know he's moving. We know he's got to get traded before February 15th or cut before February 15th. Derek Carr. Where do you think he's going? Do you want him? Are you looking to buy him right now?
I mean, for me, like, I guess yes, just because of what we've talked about. Like in the grand scheme of things, is he one of the 5 or 6 best quarterbacks in the NFL? No. But is he like a competent quarterback who, will be good enough to be a starter somewhere? Yeah, I would say so. And I assume he will start somewhere. So yeah, of course, if you can get him for, like we've talked about this whole episode, for Jared Goff 2021 prices, then yeah, absolutely, that's fine. But he doesn't offer you anything with his legs. And it just depends on where he goes. I mean, what if he ends up in like San Francisco? He could easily be a top 12 dynasty quarterback in the sense of like points per game and all that sort of stuff, because we've seen that like the system just needs a competent pocket passer with a cool head, and there's a lot of weapons there. So honestly, it just depends on where he ends up. It wouldn't surprise me, depending on the situation, like maybe somebody like, drafts a guy in this draft that needs a little bit of time, and they let Derek Carr come in and just, run the game for a year or two while they let an Anthony Richardson or somebody like that, kind of get his feet under him and figure out the league, So it wouldn't surprise me if he's more of a bridge quarterback for somebody. I don't know that anybody's like gagging to get Derek Carr. I would actually, saying that, who I think would be really interesting is the Commanders. Actually, I feel like, they need just some stability, like at the quarterback position. They've had so much volatility. It would be nice to see him go somewhere like that, where he has some decent weapons around him. He's got a decent coach, not an amazing coach, but just a bit of stability. They've got a good defense. Somewhere like that would be interesting. I don't know. It's a weird one with Derek Carr because like, I don't see the overly high ceiling, but he's got a really nice floor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I read a rumor today that the Saints are interested in trading away that first round pick they've literally just got from
that would be amazing
to go and get their car. I'd love it. I think that would be incredible for Chris Olave. But I think Michael Thomas is basically playing for his career next year. They've restructured the contract, which means I can almost guarantee that he won't be a Saint in 2024 because they're not paying him $50 million to play on the Saints. And I think that it would be a perfect fit. I think the offensive line is good. I think they've got some good weapons. I think he'd fit in seamlessly, and I'd love it if he went there. And I think at the moment he is so cheap because it's back to what we were talking about with Jimmy G. People aren't viewing him as a starting quarterback in some leagues because he's not got that starting spot, and he's too good. To me, he's like 12 to 18 in terms of his NFL as an NFL quarterback. I'm not talking fancy here. So he's going to start somewhere. Someone is going to trade for him. If nobody trades for him, the Raiders are going to cut him, and he's going to be so sought after on the free agent market.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go somewhere.
Honestly, like there's been so much buzz about the Colts trying to trade up for a rookie quarterback. But in my mind, I was like, Derek Carr feels like that is exactly what the Colts want, is like this veteran quarterback who's like solid and reliable. And they've tried so many times. They've gone for Phillip Rivers. They've gone for Carson Wentz. They're like, you know what I mean? It's like, I almost just like penciled him in to go to the Colts.
Though. It feels like they can't. It feels like they have to go and get a rookie just because they've been on that treadmill so many times.
I know.
And it's failed every time. They can't do it yet again.
But saying that though, what are they going to do? They don't have a war chest of draft capital to trade up and, get the overall 101, unless they're just happy sticking where they are and they're comfortable with any of the guys that fall to them, maybe. But no, I agree with you. I think Saints would be awesome. There was actually another team that I just thought of there. What about the Panthers?
Yeah. I mean, that
would be really nice for DJ Moore. That could
again,
be really
the question
nice.
is, are they going to trade more draft capital for another quarterback for the third year in the trot? Can they do it again?
Well, but that's the thing is like, what are they going to do? Because Frank Reich, I do think is a fairly decent head coach. So it'll be interesting to see what do they do? What is their answer? Because they can't really. I know Sam Darnold played pretty well at the end of the season there, but are they really going to be like Sam Darnold's the answer? I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? And then final, Evan, your guy, Jared Goff.
Not my
guy. Do you think he's the starter next year? Do you think they draft someone?
I think he is. Yeah, I do. I think that they're really happy with the way things have been going. Like they're building something, and I think they're comfortable with that. I think Dan Campbell has like a real passion and a vision for what he's building, and I think they're not like in a rush. You know what I mean? Like they played to their strengths. They played hard this year, and honestly, if their defense was even halfway competent, they would have been in the playoffs. You know what I mean? Like their defense is what let them down. So I don't think that they're gonna like go crazy to try and get the quarterback. I think they'd be probably happy to ride him one more year and then maybe try and get their quarterback of the future in the 24 class or something like that. You know, maybe they're going down that route of like building all the pieces up and then trying to drop the quarterback in as the last like sort of piece of the puzzle. So I think he probably is back this year. I think they really like him from what I can tell in Detroit. I mean, everything I've heard out of there is that they really like him. You know, they really, you know, like having him around. They're not like jonesing to get rid of him. So yeah, I think, you know, he probably will be there.
I think I'm probably different to consensus in terms of I think that you have the kind of consensus opinion of most people are expecting Goff back with the Lions next year. I think for me, and I have this opinion for the Lions and both the Seahawks, I think it would be really stupid if either of those teams don't be aggressive and go out and get a rookie quarterback. And the reason I say that is that I think Geno Smith and Jared Goff are good, solid, you know, probably in the 15 to 20 NFL quarterback range. I think they're solid starters. I don't think they're winning a Super Bowl. And I think that if the Lions and the Seahawks are sitting here saying, we just want to make the playoffs for the next 3 years, have a couple of playoff games, maybe win a game, maybe win the odd one, you know, like the Giants did this year, never really be in contention to win a Super Bowl, but you can have a nice playoff run. Then fine. I think, yeah, go ahead. Re-sign Jared Goff, keep him for this year, re-sign Geno Smith, do that. If your aim is to go and win a Super Bowl, I think you need one of these superstar quarterbacks. I think you need something that's got a bit of an X factor. And I don't think Jared Goff is ever going to be that. And I just don't think, I hear what you're saying of go through another year and maybe go and get the quarterback next year. But the Lions have got a top 6 pick this year. But I think the Lions are going to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be picking in the top 20. Are they going to do a San Francisco move and trade 3 first rounds to go up and get a quarterback? That's expensive. I think for me, you keep Jared Goff as your bridge quarterback. You can move on from it at any point, and you go and get one of these exciting rookies. You go and get an Anthony Richardson or a Will Levis or someone like that that's got the tools. You don't have to rush them and start them. And then you can say, right, this is our franchise quarterback, but we're going to take some time. We're going to mold him. And then we can use Jared Goff as a fringe starter. And probably by like week 10, week 12, that rookie's in.
Yeah.
I just don't believe that the Lions can say we'll go and get a quarterback in 2024, because I just think that the cost is going to be, as you've seen with the 49ers, it's crippling.
I get where you're coming from. I think I probably agree with you more on the Seattle side of it than on the Detroit side of it, because I think Seattle's defense was all right. Like there's holes in it and they need to fix, but it was like there was definitely some potential there. Was like the Lions defense was like horrific. You know, it was like up there with like the Vikings for being a terrible defense. So I don't think that they're just a quarterback away. Like I don't think if you just drop an exciting young quarterback in that they're all of a sudden a Super Bowl contender. I think they still have holes to plug on the defense for sure. And I still think the offense is a work in progress. Like they got rid of Hawkinson, so they've got kind of like a, you know, they're what are they doing at the tight end position? They don't really know. There's a really strong tight end draft. You know, they've got amazing Amon-Ra St. Brown. We hope Jameson Williams becomes something amazing, but it's not like they've got a big, massive, amazing wide receiver room, and they've got a great tight end, and they've got, you know, it's like they've got some pieces. Their offensive line is really good. So I could see it happening, but at the same time, I think where they're positioned, we know Houston more than likely needs a quarterback. We know Indianapolis is jonesing for a quarterback. And Seattle could potentially need a quarterback. So for them to want to get one of those really exciting guys, they would have to probably not even just stick it where they're at. They'd probably have to be aggressive and move up a couple picks, which again, you're sort of like, well, are they going to trade away 2 firsts to take a gamble on you know, one of these rookie quarterbacks? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see for sure. But I think they seem like really happy and comfortable with what they're building there. And it seems like it's working. So it'll be interesting to watch and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some running backs that are potentially in limbo. Aaron Jones, I think Aaron Jones for me is essentially tied to Aaron Rodgers. I think if Aaron Rodgers is back in Green Bay, I think Aaron Jones is. If Aaron Rodgers gets traded, I think Aaron Jones almost gets cut immediately. What do you agree?
That's interesting. I mean, it's definitely, I don't know. Like I know that there was some talk at the end of the season, like they expect Aaron Jones to be back next year and things like that. Whereas they haven't really said that about Aaron Rodgers. I think there's more of it, like we don't really know what's going on with Aaron Rodgers. So in some ways though, here's the thing, right? If Aaron Rodgers leaves, let's just assume that it's just for draft compensation and it's not a quarterback coming in. Does that mean then Jordan Love is the dude? And if Jordan Love is the dude, surely you want as many like solid pieces around him to try and help ease him into being a starting quarterback. So keeping Aaron Jones around, keeping AJ Dillon around, you know, keeping these young receivers, you know, all together, trying to build up a solid offensive unit seems to make more sense than letting everybody go and really throwing him in the deep end. So I don't know, man. Like he's a weird one. Like of those three, I'm the most interested in Aaron Jones, if that makes sense. I still feel like he's the most, at this point of those three, I feel like he's the most dynamic and the most exciting still. I feel like I'm really concerned about Mixon and I'm really concerned about Fournette as far as their viability, like in dynasty leagues.
Yeah. No, I think for me, Fournette, I think, look, I said earlier, the Bucks are 35 million over the cap. They can save money by moving on from Fournette. They've got a ready replacement in Rachaad White. I think Fournette is probably gone. Fournette produced 66% of his fantasy value last year as a receiver. There's going to be no offense in the NFL that is going to provide him with that receiving workload other than a Tom Brady-led offense. So for me, I think that Fournette is absolutely, the bottom's fallen out. I'm ready to get rid of him for whatever he's worth. Joe Mixon is a really interesting one because he's not on a horrific contract. The Bengals can move on from him at any point now that all the guarantees are gone. It would make sense to move on from him. You know, we saw him in the AFC title game, not on the field as much because they basically don't trust him in pass pro. They had Samaje Perine on the field more snaps than he was. I wonder, whilst it's not a massive contract, whilst they've got some cap space, T. Higgins is due for an extension. Joe Burrow is due for an extension. Jamar Chase is going to be due next year. I wonder if the Bengals, which are, let's be honest, a frugal franchise, are already starting to look at those contracts coming down the road and they say, let's move on from Joe Mixon. Let's go and get a rookie in the third, fourth round. Maybe keep some RJP Ryan around. I just wonder if we could see Joe Mixon moved at some point this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, definitely wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about it, dude. Like, you know, I think we're both on the same page. There's no real big, massive debate to be had here. I think anytime you get a aging, I mean, these were all three great running backs in their day, man. Like, for sure, like, respect and props to them. And I honestly think Aaron Jones could still be useful next year for sure. But I'm not looking to go out and invest in any of these guys. I mean, maybe Aaron Jones potentially, depending on the deal you can get for him. But like, yeah, in Dynasty, man, I would love to be trading those guys for as much as possible, or if I can get something, because I do think, like you said, a lot of teams are going to be thinking, if I can get a Rashawn Johnson in the second or third round, why am I paying a Joe Mixon? You know what I mean? Get a guy 4, 5, 6 years younger who's probably, even if he's just 80% as good, I'm paying him, 20% as much.
Yeah, no, I completely agree on all of that. Diving across to the wide receiver position, we've got here Corey Davis. I expect him to get cut by the Jets. The Jets are around about the salary cap. I think they're a couple of million over. They save almost $10.5 million by moving on from him. He's good, he's solid, but I think with Garrett Wilson, I think Elijah Moore's going to step into an every down role again next season.
Please, God.
I feel like Corey Davis is slightly expendable. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'm not interested in him at all in Dynasty. I mean, if he can get something of value, he's one of those guys that if I can use Corey Davis in my third to get into the second, I'm happy to do that. I like using those kind of players as like a stepping stone. You know what I mean? You add something little to that player to get up a level in your, for a trade or for your draft capital. I don't think you need to be counting on Corey Davis for your Dynasty rosters.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And then Mike Evans. So the Bucks, as I said, 55 million over the cap. They're paying Tom Brady 35 million to not play for them next year. They really did push all those chips in to a 3-year window to try and win. And now those checks are come due.
Second highest dead cap hit of all time.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? I wonder, Mike Evans is now at a point where they could save quite a lot of money and get some serious draft capital if they traded him. Okay. If they traded him post June 1st, they'd save 14.5 million. The guarantees are coming to an end. I don't think it's going to happen, but I just want to float it out there that I wonder if Mike Evans could get traded this offseason.
It wouldn't surprise me just from the team building side of it. Because like you said, unless they can somehow, mess with the books and trade for an Aaron Rodgers or something, like what are they going to do? You know what I mean? Like Kyle Trask isn't going to lead them to a Super Bowl. I really don't think. They're not in a position to draft like a superstar rookie quarterback. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Mike Evans, man, he is so tough. Like, honestly, dude, he is. Go ahead.
I think also that the thing that we're forgetting, he had 2 incredible weeks last year in terms of fantasy production. If you remove those 2 weeks, he was like wide receiver 40 in points.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I feel like here's the thing. Here's where I struggle. Right, I respect him so much as an NFL player that I struggle to say bad things about him for Dynasty. And I know that sounds stupid, but it's like he is so good and he's been so good for so long. But man, I'm just not interested in him in Dynasty anymore. You know what I mean? I'm just not. I don't have him on any of my rosters. I think because I feel like where he is, he's one of those weird players where the person who rosters him wants more for him than I feel like he's worth paying for. I feel like whoever has him right now on their roster wants a first for him. Do you know what I mean? And
I agree 100%.
I'm not giving a first for Mike Evans. I'm just not. You know what I mean? I'm really not. Unless I've got the most stacked roster of all time and it's just fun money, and I've got 6 firsts to play with, and I'm just hey, but that's a weird league that I wouldn't want to be in anyway. So no, I mean, for me, I'm just not in on Mike Evans anymore. I would love to trade high on him if I had him, because sometimes these things sound great. Like D-Hop going to Arizona sounded amazing at the time, and it didn't really work out. It's not been a great journey. So, him getting traded somewhere sounds cool because you think, what if he went to Kansas City or something? That'd be amazing. But what are the chances that actually happens? Or what are the chances it works out? I was actually thinking about this the other day. One of the most disappointing trades of all time has to be the Odell Beckham trade to the Browns. It was so exciting at the time. We were like, oh my gosh, this guy is a superstar and this is going to be amazing. And he's going to light it up. And he has literally done pretty much nothing since then. You know what I mean? He's had a couple of weak stretches here and there. So I think we can get overly optimistic in Dynasty and say, look, he's going to get traded. I'll bet he goes to Kansas City, or I bet he goes to Philadelphia or something crazy. And then, you know what I mean? And we get all pie in the sky. But the reality is he may just get traded somewhere for cap relief or something, and it sucks. And it's he's just an old dude who's past his heyday,
Exactly that. And then the final guy, I'm really fascinated. I think he's the player I am most intrigued to see what happens this offseason. It's T. Higgins. We saw last year those 3 wide receivers that got traded before they were paid big money. I think T. Higgins showed enough this year in those games where Jamar Chase was out that he is a wide receiver 1. I think he is a top 15 wide receiver in terms of talent in the league. But we talked about the Bengals being frugal. They've got Joe Burrow to pay. They've got Jamar Chase to pay. Are they going to want to pay T. Higgins 20+ million a year as well? It could be that he gets traded. It could be that they extend him. I'm really fascinated to see what happens. What do you think, Evan?
I just can't see them letting T. Higgins go. I think they know that the success that they've had the last couple of years has been because of that amazing trifecta, because if you got rid of T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd is a good receiver, but he's an amazing wide receiver 3. You know what I mean? He's just an okay wide receiver 2. That's going to change the whole dynamic of their offense when the defense can just really hone in on Jamar Chase and try and shut him down. When they've got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and they've got Tyler Boyd running around in the slot and things like that's a headache because Joe Burrow is amazing. So I just think I can't see them letting him go. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know what they're going to have to do it, but I think they know what they're getting themselves into. I think that's what they're there for. I think they know that if you want to be one of the big dogs, you're going to have to pay up. You know, you're going to have to find ways of saving money by using rookies in your defense and things like that, probably. And using like people on their rookie contracts. But I think once you find a T. Higgins, you know, you try your best to hold on to him.
Yeah, and they've got the cap space. I think they will re-sign him. But I also thought that the Chiefs would re-sign Tyreek Hill. I also thought that the Titans would re-sign AJ Brown, and I thought the Packers would never trade Devontae Adams. So I think he's the one that could move this offseason and be that shocking moment that we all had last offseason.
I think though with those other ones, there was underlying factors. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like the Tyreek Hill thing, we got a sense that there was a little bit of like friction there, a bit of like not happy altogether with the surroundings and with what was going on. I think the same with Devontae Adams. There was a bit of like he wanted to go play with Derek Carr. It wasn't so much that they didn't want to keep him. My understanding was even with the Packers, I think they offered him like more money maybe, or at least they offered him a good bit to stay. It was just him wanting to go play with Derek Carr and stuff. So I think, I mean, again, I'm not in the locker room, so I could be completely misreading the situation, but my sense, my vibe has been that they all really love each other. They're a real tight-knit group. You know, Burrow loves Higgins. Burrow loves Jamar Chase. You know, they're all wanting to play together, and they've got this exciting young core. I just can't see them breaking it up, you know?
Yeah, it basically depends on what T. Higgins is asking for, isn't it? Because if he's asking for that, basically top 5 money, you know, AJ Brown got 25 mil a year. If he's asking for that, I don't think the Bengals can pay Joe Burrow, 60 million, Jamar Chase probably 30 million. You know, can you tie up 115 million a year in 3 players? I don't think they can do that.
If it's those 3.
If T. Higgins is willing to take 20 million, I think it's a different answer, because it's almost like if Joe Burrow maybe takes a little less, if Jamar Chase takes a little bit less, if T. Higgins takes a little bit less, we can keep all 3 of you.
Yeah.
But if you want,
and I think
market setting deals, we can't keep all 3.
It depends, obviously, like you said, what his, you know, I wonder, and my vibe on it is like, you know, obviously they made it so far last year. They made it really close this year. I think that plays a part in it. I think when there's that feeling of like we're so close to something, I think that does play a factor. I feel like when people like AJ Brown, when he was at the Titans, and these other players, sometimes they're just like, hey, look, you know, we're probably not winning a Super Bowl, or I don't think we're going to win a Super Bowl. I might as well make as much money as possible here. Whereas obviously they're going to want to make money, of course, but at the same time, he probably really wants to win the Super Bowl, and he knows they've got a really good thing going. But yeah, I think his season was good as far as like statistically. I think that plays into the favor of the Bengals, that he had a good season, not an amazing season. I don't think he blew people out of the water. He didn't take this big, massive step forward this year that, you know, he could have maybe like the way CeeDee Lamb did. So I don't think he's taken enough of a step forward to put his foot down and demand, you know, 25 or 28 million a year or something like that. So that probably plays into the Bengals' hands a bit.
Yeah. So we're gonna finish up with some sneaky buys from Evan. I've snuck in one of myself. Before we do, make sure you're liking and subscribing on YouTube. Hit that little green bell icon. You can get notifications when we're going live. Evan, your first sneaky buy. Do you want to talk us through?
Yeah, I mean, it's first one up here is just Christian Kirk, and like I kind of mentioned earlier, it's for me the offseason is purely about value. It's just accruing value wherever you can find it. I'm honestly not the biggest Christian Kirk guy in the world. I'm really not. Like, I don't really have any shares of him. It was only because when you asked me to come on the show and you were mentioning this segment, I kind of was looking around, poking around, looking at ADPs and things like that, and it kind of just jumped out at me because I was like, okay, you know, Christian Kirk just had a really, really good season. And it's not like he was a bum before that. He just had an even better season than he has been having. I mean, in certain leagues, you know, depending on your scoring and stuff like that, he was basically a top 12 wide receiver this year, you know, like borderline top 12 wide receiver. And yet he's going as wide receiver 34 in DLF. He's going for like a late first, early second round pick in some leagues. People, I feel like, are just painting this picture that Calvin Ridley is going to show up after not playing football for 2 years and basically put Christian Kirk out of business. And I just don't think that's really true. You know, I don't think that even if Calvin Ridley comes back and is awesome, which I hope he does, but we've seen, you know, Deshaun Watson take 2 years off of football and come back and not look very good. So we don't know until we see it. That's one thing. Second thing is, you know, Christian Kirk was clearly the number one wide receiver. So even if Calvin Ridley comes in and out alphas him or whatever, he'll be what, the wide receiver 2. There's still going to be plenty of volume. There's still going to be plenty to go around. I think that for me, it's just a pure value play. You know, if you can get a guy who just finishes a wide receiver 1, and again, you look at what he did in 2021 in Arizona, which was a worse offense, in my opinion, he still had over 100 targets in that offense, 77 receptions, almost 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. So if that's kind of more your floor, he was still low end wide receiver 2. You're getting him for like wide receiver 3, 4 numbers. So for me, it's just a value play. I don't see the reason not to, if that's the price.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this offense is going to take a big step forward next year. I think that Trevor Lawrence, you know, we saw down the stretch, those final kind of 10 games, I think he really took a step, and I think he's going to take another step into next year. I think the Calvin Ridley addition potentially helps Christian Kirk. I think it's another weapon on the field. Christian Kirk is he runs 70, 80% of his routes from the slot, but he can be that deep threat from the slot. And I think that him not having to run those intermediate routes that Calvin Ridley is elite at will open him up to get potentially some more of those higher value touches down the field, which is only going to be good things for his fantasy production. So yeah, I really like the buy. My sneaky buy, Rashad Bateman. I think, look, it's difficult when I'm sitting here saying buy a guy because he's really talented. He's shown glimpses in year 1. He's shown glimpses in year 2, but there's been injuries. His quarterback's been injured. But I really, really believe in the talent. I think he is such a talented wide receiver, and I think that his current ADP of wide receiver 36 is criminal. He was 13th in yards per route run last year. He was 20th in targets per route run. He's under contract for another couple of years. You don't have to worry about that. I think he fits this offense perfectly, and I think he's going to be 100 plus, 120 target guy next year. He's just got to stay healthy, and if you know, they re-sign Lamar and they can potentially add another weapon in the receiving game, I really think he's going to massively outproduce his current value. Keep Trade Cut have currently got him worth the 202. I'm sending the 202 for Rashad Bateman every single day of the week. I think that is an absolute bargain. Do you agree, or do you think I'm crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy. I personally, my take on it is I really love the talent. What I would say is if you're doing a startup, I think he's probably a real value. I think that, you know, everyone's going to be like, I don't know. And then you're going to get him at a really nice value. I think in existing leagues, he probably now belongs with the Rashad Bateman truther in your league. And so I don't think that person, like if it's you, you know, if you Rich have him, even if you're rebuilding, are you going to accept, if I come to you and say, here's the 201, will you give me Rashad Bateman? Are you accepting that? No. Exactly. So you're going to want a first round pick for a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy, doesn't play in a high volume offense, you know, all that sort of stuff, which I understand. I get the argument, but it's a risk reward thing. You know what I mean? It's very much like, in my mind, not the same exact thing, but it's like a Kadarius Toney sort of situation. You're like, okay, this guy could be the wide receiver 1 for Patrick Mahomes and be like amazing. And you see these flashes and you're like, this guy's incredible, but he can't stay healthy. And we haven't seen him actually nail that down. And again, it's not a perfect example. I do think Rashad Bateman as just a pure wide receiver is more talented. And I love Rashad Bateman's talent. So it just depends on the situation. I think in startups, 100% agree with you. I think in an existing league, yes, knock on the door 100%. And if you can find the manager who's just sick, sore, and tired of Rashad Bateman and tired of getting burned by the injuries, and you can get him for the 202, yes, 100% I agree with you. I just have a feeling that, do you know what I mean? Not a lot of people like in that league. We're in a league together with a bunch of content creators. And I think your friend, your buddy Liam has Rashad Bateman in that league. And I've got like the 201 or 202 or something. And I'm pretty confident if I go offer him the 202 for, he's not going to take, you know, the 202 for Rashad Bateman, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd need to check my values, but I'd probably need a top 7 pick. I think if you offered me the 108, I think I'd probably rather have Rashad Bateman right now.
Yeah, you see what I mean? And to be fair, like you're obviously really tuned in and, you know, not every dynasty player is the same as you. So that's why you go and ask the questions, you know, because there are people who are just like, yeah, whatever, sure, 201, take him. But for me, as the other side of it, I would be like, I'm definitely not giving you the 107 or the 106 for Rashad Bateman. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm just like, I see the risk side of it more than the reward side of it, I think, at this stage.
Yeah. And then your final guy, Evan, talk to me.
Wan'Dale Robinson. And I just did this one because, well, I mean, for quite a few reasons, but he's kind of one of those like bargain bucket sort of values. You know what I mean? Where he's one of the guys I love taking dart throws like this, because if it works out, it's such a massive ROI. And if it doesn't work out, it didn't really cost you that much anyways, because, you know, you've got a little slide up there at the minute. He's going wide receiver 49 in DLF ADP, a late second round pick and keep trade cut. He actually, so it's really interesting. He's one of the guys, one of the things I try and do, one of the things I pride myself on is not having take lock and being willing to admit when I'm wrong. And when I'm, you know, I wasn't overly high on him coming in. I was like, I think I had around a mid second round grade on him for rookie picks for last year in the rookie draft. So I was like, yeah, I like him. There's things I like about him, things I'm not sure about, but I was really impressed when he hit the league. I really like things, for example, he was picked by this regime. We've already talked about in depth about Daniel Jones and what a step forward he's made because of the solid coaching staff. I think Brian Daboll's a good coach. I think he's got a good coaching staff. I think the Giants are an ascending franchise at the moment. Whether that continues, we'll see. We'll have to see how their draft picks go and how their offseason goes and things like that. But I think they've picked Wan'Dale Robinson. They want him there. Yes, he had an injury, but that's why you're getting such a value on him. In the sort of, he got injured right at the start of the season, was out for a few weeks, came in, really only played sort of week 6 to 11. So it's quite a small sample size, but in that small sample size, he was commanding around a 20% target share, which is really, really, really solid, really nice for a rookie wide receiver. He has second round draft capital, which draft capital snobs will love. You know what I mean? Like guys who just put a lot of weight and a lot of value in draft capital. And let us not forget, he is only 1 year removed from being in college. In college, he had a 39.3% target share, which is 99th percentile. He also had a breakout age of 18.7, which is 95th percentile. I think there's a lot of things to really, really like about Wan'Dale Robinson. And again, for the cost of like a late second round pick, there's really very little risk and quite a lot of reward. I think he's somebody that, you know, based on if you project forward and say, from my understanding, I was looking up recently, they think he could be ready to go week 1. Now, will he be ready full steam ahead? Probably not. But if he's ready to be out there and playing week 1, that's really positive. If you project forward roughly 18 to 20% target share with the offense, the way it was and things like that, I mean, he could be getting over 100 targets this year. So somebody who could get 100 targets in an ascending offense with what I really like about him, again, I don't want to go on too long, but he's really good at yards after catch. I think that's a massive part of the NFL these days. You look at guys like Deebo Samuel, you look at guys like AJ Brown, your yak monsters. He's really good at yards after catch. He played a running back at part of his career. You know, he understands yards after catch, things like that. So somebody that really could be a solid like wide receiver 3 flex play for you that you can get for like a late second round pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the target volume that you talked about was incredible. You know, if you look at targets per route run, he was 21st last year. That's in the same category as DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin. That's ahead of Rashad Bateman, Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore. Like when he was on the field, the Giants wanted to get him the ball. And as you said, you know, he was the only wide receiver basically that this regime spent capital, and I know they brought in Isaiah Hodgins and people like that, but they went out and drafted him. My concern with Wan'Dale Robinson is that ADOT. You can see it on screen, 6.2 yards. That is low. Okay, he is going to have incredible volume in order to be seriously fantasy relevant. I think that hopefully he can be used a little bit more downfield, and we can see that ADOT creep up, and he can be, you know, a good, competent fantasy receiver. But if that ADOT stays around, you know, 6 yards, you saw with Deebo this year, it's just so hard to be really good from a fantasy perspective when you're basically relying on incredible efficiency.
I do think as well, just to that point, if you look at all quarterbacks this year who had a minimum of 150 dropbacks, Daniel Jones was dead last in ADOT. His ADOT itself was 6.4. So it Daniel Jones was, and that a lot of it I think is being in a new system, not having weapons, not having a lot of like established guys down the field and things like that. So I would expect, again, going back to the Jared Goff thing that I thought was really interesting, Jared Goff was near the very bottom in ADOT in 2021. He's jumped up to about sort of middle of the pack. So I think that's a progressive thing in the offense. I think if they get a receiver in the draft or they sign somebody or they trade for somebody, they have a better record next year, a second year in the system. I do expect that ADOT to go up. But yeah, I do understand and I get your point.
Yeah, no. Well, fingers crossed that he can improve that and really outproduce his current value. Well, that brings us to the end, Evan. Thank you ever so much for coming on. Before we finish, any final thoughts for the offseason? Give us a little snippet. Any rookie that you absolutely love right now?
Oh man, I've just been digging into the running backs so far, so I haven't got into the wide receivers or the tight ends or anything yet. So I think it's a really nice class. I don't think outside of Bijan, I don't know that there's any like game wrecker, like, oh my gosh, this guy's automatically a top 5 dynasty wide receiver or running back. But there's a couple of guys I think are really, really interesting. So I think it'll be a fun class. I think it'll be your second round picks, even your third round picks will have value this year. But at the same time, if people are going crazy, I do sort of feel like there's a lot of depth, but not a lot of elite talent, if that makes sense. So I feel like if you're expecting to load up and like be a contender because of your rookie draft picks this year, I don't know. I feel like it's a really good year if you're like middle of the pack and you have a good solid group of like second round picks and you can just get some bulk and some depth and really make a push. But if you've like tanked last year and you've got like 6 or 7 firsts and you're expecting to like go, you know, gung ho and like just take the league by storm, I don't know that's going to work out. Like, but no, I really appreciate you having me on, buddy. I'm really excited about your new venture. Love the work that you're doing. Hope that everybody who's listened disregards, you know, look, he had me on. This is the low bar. He's got much better guests in the future. Don't worry about it. Make sure and definitely subscribe to the Fantasy Sanctuary. Check in everything with Rich. It's just going to be onwards and upwards from here.
No, thank you so much for coming on. Evan is, you know, one of the brightest minds, but also one of the best guys in the industry. You can follow him on Twitter. He is at FFEvanLucian. You can check out his work on Dynasty Nerds and the Dynasty Debate podcast. Thank you very much, and we'll be back very soon.